Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Seattle devotees are very grateful for this opportunity to contribute to Bhagavan's 74th Aradhana Day celebrations. As a part of our offering, we would like to chant 12 namas, names of Bhagavan, from his 108 names Ashtottaram, along with the meaning, and also add a bhajan and end our offering with excerpts from cherished memories by Srimati Kanakammal. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Mahotsaha, unfailingly enthusiastic. In an ordinary person's life, the waxing and waning of interest is common, for the good and bad events are happening continuously. Only the one who has discovered the inherent bliss can remain always enthusiastic irrespective of outer circumstances. Devi Kalottaram, which has been translated in Tamil by Ramana, says that one who is desireless and is inhering in the self is enthusiastic about jnana. Om Mahotsahaya Namaha. Kusagradihi, of strong intellect. The mind which is distracted by 1,000 thoughts is not strong. A mind which is freed from the attraction of objects alone is singly focused and can turn within its source and enjoy the bliss therein. In Lalita Sahasranama, there is a praise to the effect that goddess is difficult to attain for an extroverted mind and can be reached easily by an inward-turned mind. This underscores the need for a mind which is strong because it is not scattered. Om Kusagradiye Namaha.
Shanta Sankalpa Sambrambha, free of disturbance of thoughts. It is only thoughts which act as a screen preventing the enjoyment of eternal bliss. Therefore, only those who are thought free are naturally happy. Om Shanta Sankalpa Sambrambhaya Namaha. Sushandruk, of pure and auspicious vision. It is only when one is freed of the identification with the body that it is possible to have pure vision. Then one is rooted in the eternally pure self. Ramana terms it as the true vision, the limitless I. It is also termed as the divine vision in some other works. Om Susandrushe Namaha.
Savita, the sun. Here the reference is to luster of Ramana's state of jnana. Truly, he is the sun of knowledge. The sun is praised as the one responsible for the protection of all living beings. The sun is also described as the essence of Vedas, the heart of all. Om Savitre Namaha. Stiraha, the still one. The Supreme is without movement and is the ground on which all life is in perpetual movement in accordance with the divine law. The attribute is applicable to Ramana as he was firmly rooted at the source. Om Sthiraya Namaha.
Tapakshapita Sarvangaha, one whose every limb is emaciated by tapas. The state in which Ramana, when he arrived at Tiruvannamalai, is aptly described in Tiruvachagam, which says, "There is no consciousness of the body, no awareness of the passage of night or day. The fullness of bliss alone exists." In the first 2 years after his arrival, while staying in the Arunachaleshwara temple at Gurumurtam and the Mango Grove, Ramana remained in a state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. He had no consciousness of the body. Due to total neglect at that time, his body had become mere skin and bones. Shiva Prakasam Pillai has described this intense tapas of Ramana in his Ramana Charitra Ahaval. Om Tapakshapita Sarvangaya Namaha. Pullambuja Vilochanaha, with eyes of lotus in full bloom. Since he was immersed in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Ramana's body was neglected. Yet, to the surprise of all, His face radiated charm and grace poured forth from his eyes. This has also been described by Shiva Prakasam Pillai in his Ramana Charitra Ahaval. Om Pullambuja Vilochanaya Namaha.
Chandrikasitahasa Shri Manditanana Mandalaha, whose beautiful face is lit up by the cool moonlight of a smile. Just as moonlight removes the darkness of night and heat of the sun, Ramana's smile ends the darkness of the mind and sufferings of the world. Ramana's face had a natural beauty of its own, which was enhanced by his smile. It would still the mental waves of those present. Many poets who have enjoyed the wondrous smile have praised it to their heart's content. When Ramana was observing Mauna, it was only the charm of his smile and gracious glance which filled the devotees with happiness. The song beginning with Ahatamarai Malar Needurai describes how by a mere smile Ramana awakens one to the awareness and bliss of self-abidance. Om Chandrika Sitahasa Shri Manditanana Mandalaya Namaha. Chutavatyam Samasinaha, calmly seated in the mango grove. Ramana was residing for some time in the mango grove adjacent to the famous Samadhi temple of Guru Murtam. Since he was in the lofty state of self-abidance, it is said he was seated as the embodiment of calmness. Om Chutavatyam Samasinaya Namaha.
Churnitakila Vibhramaha, one who has destroyed all illusions. He had completely annihilated every kind of Maya, not only for himself, but for those who sought his guidance. Om Churnitakila Vibhramaya Namaha. Veda Vedanta Tattvajnaha, one who has understood the inner significance of the Vedas and of Vedanta. Having known, enjoyed, and himself become the very Chidananda, awareness bliss, which is the essence and import, the source and the goal of scriptures, he now fully embodies and directly reveals the reality to which the scriptures are only pointers. Om Veda Vedanta Tattvajnaya Namaha.
Sadanandaya Namo Ramana.
Sadanandaya Namo Ramana.
Gambiraya Namo Ramana.
Gambiraya Namo Ramana.
Paripurnaya Namo Ramana.
Paripurnaya Namo Ramana.
Abhayapradaya Namo Ramana.
Abhayapradaya Namo Ramana.
Dayanavaya Namo Ramana.
Dayavarnaya Namo Ramana.
Suprasannaya Namo Ramana.
Suprasannaya Namo Ramana.
Sonachalaya Namo Ramana.
Sonachalaya Namo Ramana.
Abhayapradaya Namo Ramana.
Abhayapradaya Namo Ramana.
Karunakaraya Namo Ramana.
Karunakaraya Namo Ramana.
Golakshmi Priyaya Namo Ramana.
Golakshmi Priyaya Namo Ramana.
Devatamaya Namo Ramana.
Devatamaya Namo Ramana.
Abhayapradaya Namo Ramana.
Abhayapradaya Namo Ramana.
Sadanandaya Namo Ramana.
Sadanandaya Namo Ramana.
Gambiraya Namo Ramana.
Gambiraya Namo Ramana.
नमो रमणा
परिपूर्णाय नमो रमणा
अभयप्रदाय नमो रमणा
अभयप्रदाय नमो रमणा
दयार्णवाय नमो रमणा
दयार्णवाय नमो रमणा
सुप्रसन्नाय नमो रमणा
सुप्रसन्नाय नमो रमणा
सोणाचलाय नमो रमणा
सोनाचलाय नमो रमणा
अभयप्रदाय नमो रमणा
अभयप्रदाय नमो रमणा
करुणाकराय नमो रमणा
करुणाकराय नमो रमणा
गोलक्ष्मीप्रियाय नमो रमणा
गोलक्ष्मीप्रियाय नमो रमणा
देवतमाय नमो रमणा
देवतमाय नमो रमणा
अभयप्रदाय नमो रमणा
अभयप्रदाय नमो रमणा
अभयप्रदाय नमो रमणा
अभयप्रदाय नमो रमणा
नमो रमणा नमो रमणा नमो रमणा नमो रमणा नमो
Ideal home life. In the early days, there were very few permanent residents in the ashram, and the ashram itself was just a simple, small affair. In those days, Bhagavan used to work in the kitchen every morning, guiding and assisting the kitchen workers. Bhagavan's intimate devotees treasured these quiet early morning hours in the kitchen because of the opportunity to work in close proximity to Bhagavan. One morning, Bhagavan was chopping greens. Muruganar was sitting close to Bhagavan and was engaged in the same task. Bhagavan was recounting anecdotes of his days on the hill. He was talking about the various kinds of herbs found on the hill and about the properties of each kind. He told stories about how he had climbed the tamarind tree and plucked the tender leaves so that the greens granny could cook them for him. He talked about the old lady's amazing knowledge about the properties of every kind of herb that grew on the hill. Bhagavan recalled that the lady would say, "This leaf right here is good for your eyesight. This one, it has cooling properties, and so if you eat it regularly, you need not apply oil on your head to cool your system. This one is very effective as a laxative," and so on. Bhagavan continued, "There are several rare herbs to be found on the Arunachala hill. It is said that some of these herbs can wipe out sensation of hunger and thirst, and that sages used to take these herbs so that they could perform penance for years together without being bothered by hunger and thirst. Some of the herbs are supposed to bestow longevity, and it is believed that these help sages to live for several centuries. There is even a belief, with the help of some herbs, one could acquire the power to transport oneself through space and reach any place of one's choice just by thinking about it." Muruganar was fascinated by Bhagavan's words and completely forgot the work on hand. Bhagavan finished his portion of the job, and with the intention of stacking all the greens together and gathering all the roots into one single heap, he looked at Muruganar's work spot and remarked, "Look at him, he's really very smart. Muruganar, your skill in chopping greens is as striking as your success in running a household." Muruganar's extraordinarily domestic skills are, of course, well known to all of us. Bhagavan's remark jolted Muruganar out of his trance-like state. He looked down at his handiwork. The few stalks he had managed to chop were lying scattered all over the place. The roots were in even messier state, lying like wounded soldiers on a battlefield. Then he looked at Bhagavan's portion of the work and saw the chopped greens piled up neatly in one place with the roots in a separate heap. Even the roots had been laid in a neat pile. Not a scrap had been wasted, nothing was out of place. Muruganar was quite ashamed of himself. As if to add insult to injury, Bhagavan was now making fun of his clumsy attempts at helping in the kitchen. What could poor Muruganar do? He could think of only one form of retaliation. He went out, took a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and left the paper on Bhagavan's sofa. As soon as Bhagavan entered the hall, he picked up the piece of paper and read it. Seeing the smile of amusement as he read, the devotees in the hall asked him what was on the piece of paper. Bhagavan handed the paper to the nearest person and said, "Here, read it yourself." This devotee had not been in the kitchen that morning, and so he had no idea of the incident referred to in the poem. He requested Bhagavan to explain. Bhagavan said, "Muruganar was helping me chop vegetables this morning, and I teased him about his lack of skill in domestic chores. I told him that he chopped the grains with the same efficiency with which he managed his household. In reply to my remarks, he has written this poem. The gist of the poem is, 'Oh Ramana, you are an extraordinarily efficient person. Why don't you marry an equally efficient young lady and set up house? Why should you be wandering around as a mendicant in loincloth, begging food when you could so easily have set up an ideal household?'"
The triad. My parents and my brothers had great regard for Sri Chandrasekharendra Saraswati Swami, the Sankaracharya of the Kanchi Kamakoti Madam. This sage was revered as the Paramacharya. Whenever the opportunity arose, my father would go to see the Paramacharya and get his blessings. In 1958, the Paramacharya was on a visit to Madras and he was staying in the Aswamedha Mandapam in West Mambalam. One evening, when I went to see him, the Paramacharya was alone in the room except for one or two of the Math attendants. I was very happy to have the unexpected chance to speak to him without disturbance. I had bought some fruits as offering. I placed the tray of fruits before him and prostrated. Paramacharya looked at me with a smile and made gracious inquiries about my family members. He then asked me, "Are you on a visit to Madras?" I nodded my head. Then he said, "Are you not staying in Ramanashramam in Tiruvannamalai?" I replied, "I am a permanent resident there." Paramacharya's next words gave me a thrill. He said, "Yours is a life of contemplation in solitude, is it not?" I was unable to speak. I just nodded my head. Then he asked, "Engaging yourself in listening to Vedantic texts?" Again, I nodded silently. His next question was, "Are you cooking for yourself?" Once more, I nodded. I was overcome with emotion because in these three succinct questions, Paramacharya had summed up the most significant aspects of my life at that time. I had been living alone for a long time, spending my time in contemplation and meditation. Ever since settling down in Tiruvannamalai, I had cooked my own meals. It was during that period that I had the privilege of listening to Muruganar's exposition of that immortal work, Orivil Odukam. Obviously, Paramacharya's three questions gave me an emotional satisfaction beyond description. With tears in my eyes, I prayed, with Paramacharya's blessings, my life should continue along these same lines. Such is Paramacharya's compassion that he graciously lifted his palm in benediction and said with a smile, "Yes, all right." It seemed to me that Paramacharya had wanted to know the details of my life at Ramanashramam. His questions had been unerringly detected at finding out these details. Having obtained this information, he smiled his approval and with his benedictory gesture assured me that things would continue unchanged, thus affording me the opportunity to carry on with my spiritual pursuits. Such is the power of his look that I felt totally convinced that my spiritual pursuits would proceed satisfactorily now that I had obtained the seal of approval from Paramacharya himself.
Lizard devotion. Muruganar regarded Bhagavan with as much reverent awe as loving devotion. To Muruganar, Bhagavan's smallest wish was a command to be carried out without the slightest delay. When in Bhagavan's presence, Muruganar would be sitting with his eyes wide open. He would be so absorbed in his contemplation of Bhagavan's captivating form that he would be unaware of anything else. In fact, whenever Bhagavan happened to look for Muruganar in order to get some writing done, the other devotees would wake Muruganar from his trance and draw his attention to the fact that Bhagavan wanted his assistance. Once, Muruganar had just prostrated to Bhagavan when Bhagavan asked him some question regarding some literary work. Still lying on the floor, Muruganar just lifted up his head alone and answered Bhagavan's query. Only after giving Bhagavan a detailed account of the matter did he get up from the floor. Viswanatha Swami, who was in the hall at the time, was quite amazed by Muruganar's behavior. When Muruganar left the hall, Viswanatha Swami followed him outside and said to Muruganar, "What is this? Your behavior is strange indeed. When Bhagavan speaks to you, do you not have to stand up and listen to him with respectful attention? How can you lie on the floor with your head raised like a lizard while Bhagavan is talking to you?" Muruganar was very much upset when he heard this. In a faltering voice, he said, "You are right. I should not have spoken to Bhagavan while lying on the floor. But when Bhagavan speaks to me, I forget everything else except the fact that Bhagavan is asking me a question and that I should answer it immediately. In the urgency of the moment, I cannot think about whether I'm standing, sitting, or lying down. What can I do?" Seeing how deeply upset Muruganar was, Viswanatha Swami realized the depth of his feelings and could not say anything further. However, he couldn't resist the temptation to tease Muruganar for what he termed his lizard devotion.
Avayar's poetic skill. Thiruvalluvar was one of the greatest of Tamil poets. In his immortal Tirukural, he has recorded the wisdom of the ages. The greatness of the Tirukural lies in the fact that the highest philosophical truths and the most pragmatic advice about everyday life and values have been presented in pithy verses, each verse being no more than 1 3/4 lines in length. Once, Bhagavan's devotees were discussing Thiruvalluvar's skill in condensing the greatest truths into the shortest of verses. Someone mentioned that Idaikadar, one of the famous poets of the Sangam age, had composed a verse in praise of Thiruvalluvar's unique ability. Idaikadar says, "So much wisdom has been condensed into such compact verses that it seems as though Thiruvalluvar has drilled a hole in a single mustard seed and filled it with all the waters of the 7 seas." Bhagavan, who was listening to this discussion, turned to Muruganar and said, "Hasn't Avayar condensed the Kural even further?" To this query, Muruganar replied, "Yes, indeed. Avayar has composed a poem of amazing brevity and unmatched beauty. It is an interesting story. Once a group of poets were discussing the greatness of Thiruvalluvar and the unique nature of the Tirkural. Avayar was asked to give her opinion. She said, "All of you seem to be highly impressed by the so-called brevity of the Tirkural. But is it really so very concise and compact? Can a collection of 1330 couplets divided into 133 chapters be thought of as being brief or concise? I cannot see the need for so many verses just to tell us about virtue, wealth, and happiness. In my opinion, the Tirukural is an unnecessarily long composition." The other poets were taken aback by Avayar's words. They did not believe that the matter in the Tirukural could possibly be condensed any further. So they challenged Avayar to compose a really short poem which could be considered equal to the Tirukural in brevity, clarity, and beauty. Immediately, Avaya responded with the following poem. Charity is the supreme virtue. Wealth is that which is earned through lawful means. The happiness that is enjoyed by a loving couple through the union of minds is the only true happiness. The renunciation of virtue, wealth, and happiness in order to seek the supreme results in everlasting bliss. Muruganar said, whereas Valluvar had dealt with the three subjects of virtue, wealth, and happiness, Avayar had included realization also in a 4-line poem. All the other poets were speechless with wonder. Bhagavan and his devotees too were full of appreciation for Avayar's unique skill as a poet. This anecdote is certainly not known to many. It is doubtful whether even a scholar specializing in ancient Tamil literature would have heard about it. But to a devotee of Bhagavan, such precious pearls of wisdom are easy to come by. Such is the power of Bhagavan's presence. Om Namo Ramana.
Thank you, devotees. Now we would like to invite the next Satsang devotees to continue Bhagavan celebrations. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.